All right. Good afternoon. Good early evening. This is Nhra, the president of the Los Angeles National Human Resources Association. Thank you for joining us on our initial launch of LA NHRA's Diversity, DE&I Council. We have an incredible panel that we are launching tonight. And it's not just a panel. This is actually the council that's going to be representing and guiding LA NHRA as we move forward, developing our programming and bringing resources to the LA NHRA community as well as the human resources community. So we've done a lot of really exciting things at LA NHRA. The Executive of the Year was a cornerstone event for us. And I would say that this is absolutely one of the larger cornerstones that I've been a part of, and I'm really proud of the work that this group has already done, but I'm really excited and proud of the work that we're going to do in the future. And part of the reason we wanted to form this council was to ensure that we had different sets of eyes and diverse eyes looking at this topic. And the purpose of today's webinar conversation is going to introduce the council, but also introduce the different panelists that we have that are going to be bringing their insight and their experience. So first and foremost, what I wanted to first share, LA NHRA has been very busy during 2020 and COVID. We've taken a bit of a respite since COVID hit. I think we initially had 10 or 11 different webinars, and they were widely attended. And since then, we took a break, an intentional break, because we wanted to really think about what we're going to do for 2021. And with that in mind, we have developed a really strong calendar for 2021. And I'm going to share my screen so you can take a look at that. And obviously, we'll be sending this out to all of our members and all of you attending tonight and all those people that are in our newsletter. I'm not going to go through this line by line. There's some changes for our programming for next year. We're going to be hosting member events, and we're going to be hosting non-member events. And we'll be talking in a few minutes about a partnership that we've launched into with a group called I4CP, as well as a partnership with a group called HX Transforma. And I4CP has been in business for several years. They're a think tank, research and development organization. I'm going to let Lori speak a little bit more to that. But our events are already booked for all of 2021. And we will send this calendar out to all of you so you can take a look at it. Part of the calendar that we're bringing to you for the member events are CHRO roundtables, when our members will have the opportunity to engage CHROs in a very intimate small group session with 20, 30, maybe 40 members and CHROs like Dina Barmacy from Cheesecake Factory, Christy Karandikar from Westfield, those type of organizations. So we're really excited about what we have in store for 2021. We're really excited for the future of LA NHRA, and we're looking forward to sharing more of that information with you and getting this calendar out to you in the next few days. So as far as the LA NHRA DE&I Council, we put a lot of energy into this initial launch, and we developed a mission statement that I'm going to just take a quick moment and I'm going to read through. And this was developed by the various council members that you are going to hear from tonight. And as you can see, if you saw the marketing, we have Camille Boothe from the Springhill company. We have Lalita Nordquist from stamps.com, Jerry Gonzales from Lucas Museum of Narrative Art, Hannah Sweiss from Fisher Phillips, Dr. Anita Polite-Wilson, a DIB facilitator and inclusion coach, and then Barb Francis from SC Fuels. And the mission statement that they brought together, that we brought together, is as follows. We are diverse business professionals within and tangent to the human resources function who are committed to amplifying the need for change and focus on DEI matters within the workplace. We recognize that racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination exist within and outside the workplace. So our goal is to unite HR and diversity leaders to share best practices, initiate change in discrimination, and promote the causes of this disenfranchised. We promote inclusivity at all levels and encourage healthy, open discussions based in humility, the desire to learn and be better, as well as the shared commitment to elevate and include minority groups. So I can't thank the council enough for the blood, sweat, and tears that they've put into that mission statement, for the work that they've put into this event tonight. And then I also want to thank all of our council members for the work they're going to put into LA NHRA and the DE&I programming moving forward. We will be hosting 2 DE&I events annually, and all of our programming will be reviewed and receive feedback from the DE&I Council to ensure that we are keeping DE&I in the forefront of our minds in this conversation. Another area that, another partner that we've brought on is I4CP. And I'm trying to see, actually, if Lori is with us. I4CP is an organization that we're really excited to have join us. And they are, as I mentioned, are a research and a think tank. And they're going to bring a lot of data-driven type information to LA and HRA and the DE&I world that we're going to be focusing on. And as of right now, there's Lori. There's Lori. Let me come to Lori. And let's see. I'm learning on the fly. I have to make Lori a host. Work in progress. Let's see. Lori Likens. Oops. Make sure. Lori, I think I just allowed you to talk. Can you hear us, Lori, or can you speak?
Yes, I think you unmuted me. Thank you.
There we are. Okay, so I'm glad that worked out. So Lori is with I4CP, and Lori can do a much better job of explaining I4CP than I can. I've already stumbled through it enough. So I'm going to allow Lori I'm going to give her the stage in a second here. We will be hosting 4 or 5 different events for members only with I4CP in the future in 2021. And they'll also be sharing their information with us moving forward on our monthly events. And I think this is a good time for me to turn it over to Lori so I can stop rambling, and then Lori can share a little bit about I4CP and then bring some information as well on the DE&I conversation. So Lori, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Am I allowed to share my desktop?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hand it over, Andrew.
Did I do that?
Nope. Hey, at least I'm unmuted. That's good.
All right. Lori, why don't you go ahead and I'll figure out how to get you control so you can.
Sure. I think it's I think it's actually somewhere up at the top of your toolbar. But yes, I will get going. Hi, everybody. Greetings from the other side of the continent. I'm in New York City. And I just want to say we've all been sitting here in New York City going through our own mess, but we've also been watching what's been happening in California. And I have colleagues in California, and we just have you in our hearts and are thinking about you every day. It's been a terrible, terrible ordeal, I'm sure. So yes, my name is Lori Likens. I'm the Vice President of Research at the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We call ourselves I4CP for short. We're corporately headquartered in Seattle, but we have folks all over the country.
Did we just lose Lori?
I think we did. think we did.
Oh,
She
no.
seems muted.
Well, I promoted her to a panelist.
Okay,
So
I think I'm unmuted.
there you are. I promoted you to a panelist without telling you, Lori. Go ahead.
And now I'm even on camera. Oh my gosh. Hi, you guys. I'm going to ask that question we all love hearing all the time. Can you see me? Can you see my desktop? Okay. Let me share my desktop. Here we go. Okay. Are we good?
We're good.
Everybody's with me. Okay, great. Hi. Okay, so where were we? So we're corporately headquartered in Seattle. The rest of us are all over the country. We have a hub of researchers. Most of the folks that I work with down in the Tampa Bay area. We have folks in Chicago and Boston, out in California and everywhere in between. And as Andrew said, yes. And here I'm going to start my stopwatch because I have 5 minutes and I'm not going over that 5 minutes, I promise. So yes, we are an independent research think tank, and that piece of it super important to us because our research is 100% objective. We don't work with vendors or consultants. There's no underwriting that goes on. So we're not slipping, rave reviews of vendors or technology to our reports because that's not who we are. We focus on the people practices that drive high performance. And so all of our research is really focused on high performance. So what is high performance? With every survey that we do, and every one of our studies is built on a foundation of data that we gather in a survey. We ask everybody to let us know how their organizations have been performing over a 5-year period in these 4 areas: revenue, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. We do go out and use publicly available data and validate this. So then when we filter our data from all of our surveys, we have our aggregate results, but then we take a much deeper dive and we slice up the data and we look at, okay, what are the leaders out there doing? And then we take it a step further and look at what they're doing and how, what correlates to market performance. And then we also look at practices that are showing high correlations to superior market performance. We call those next practices when they're things that most organizations haven't started doing yet, but they have, off the chart correlation to effectiveness or market performance. So that's a crash course in what we mean, and a lot of the verbiage that we throw around that can be confusing, and I know probably pretty annoying to some people. Cindy Ballard can maybe attest to that. So here's an example of how we talk about practices, next practices. These are examples from 3 studies we've done in the past year on mergers and acquisitions and why they fail, the power of employee resource groups, and then talent acquisition study that we did about 1.5 years ago. So we say, look, 11 times high performance organizations we found are 11 times more likely to place a top priority on cultural synergies between the 2 merging companies from the very beginning rather than as an afterthought. So that's the way that we think about the data and the way that we talk about it. So when we say, we like to be able to say that we can tell the member companies that we work with what's coming around the curve. We really can predict what's up, what's next. So we've also found over years of research, and we're actually in our 60th year. We started out as an academically based think tank at UMass up in Massachusetts. And we became, private organization in 2007, I believe, and I've been along for the ride the whole time. So we have found longitudinally, this is empirically driven that high performing organizations consistently outperform their competitors in these 5 key performance areas. And so that's what we focus all of our research around. And we approach our research by looking at data, building tools, really including our members and non-member companies in the research that we do, and putting it all together so that it's a really solid balance of quantitative and qualitative. So we talk about all the practices that are really helping companies, but then we actually do interviews and case studies and lay out step by step what it actually looks like in practical application in a company that we name, and we interview the executives and name them too, which is really pretty cool. Because that enables everybody else to read these things and reach out to a Cindy Ballard and say, hey, Cindy, I read about this practice you guys are doing. Can we talk more about it? Which is what we're all about. We're all about building community within the HR community. And then these are all of the subject areas that we're covering right now, which is a lot. We're pretty much 24/7, and the past year especially, pretty much 24/7 trying to cover all of this. This is just a quick peek of the constellation of all of the companies that we work with. Here's a sample of some of the assets that we've produced just in the past year. This is what's in the works right now that we're, right now pumping out a lot of research and tools and other assets on these topics. And then this is just a peek at our website and what that looks like. We deliver our research through a lot of different modalities and mediums. And this is an example of a bias auditing checklist that we're working on right now that we're creating with our members. And then this is an example of our expert network. We do a lot of connecting of our members. So they'll call us up and say, hey, we're really struggling with this issue. Who else in the membership has dealt with this? We put together tons of flash calls and get-togethers to talk about it. This is a heat map. It's an example of one issue that one company had and everybody else that came together to help them resolve that. And then we've also been very responsive to what's been happening with all of us since January. We created overnight pretty much a resource center on our website. It's free to the public. You don't have to be a member. You can access all this information. We're hosting weekly calls that are functionally driven. So if you want to get on the phone with other HR people, you can, or L&D people. So we're going to keep doing this as long as people need it. And it may be a while. And this is an example of some of the data that we've been gathering lately, especially with all the events of the summer. So we've been asking a lot of survey questions about what's going on with racial equity. How are your organizations responding? We're having a lot of conversations to talk about all of this. We're finding that it's a top priority, but most organizations aren't feeling like HR is completely prepared to drive the change that needs to be driven. This, by the way, this is all publicly available on our website. We haven't firewalled this because we feel like it's so important. And I know I've gone over, but this is really important. This is something that we just published today, actually. This is our most critical issue right now, everybody, on top of everything else that we're dealing with. But women are leaving the workforce, and it's women with college degrees, women who should and can be future leaders. They're getting frustrated. The pandemic has just really accelerated this because women were already leaving the workforce in droves. But this is a crisis, and it's something that organizations really need to stop and take a breath and think about. And I was on a flash call earlier today with a group of our member companies. And one of the things that personally I believe is critical is for support for working parents and childcare in whatever form that takes becomes elevated to the same priority and level of importance as healthcare benefits and dental insurance that we offer our employees. We need to get childcare and how we're supporting working parents up in that same level of priority. So there's a lot going on. I know I'm talking really quickly. The final thing I want to say is that this is kind of bleak. Organizations are telling us, yes, we know there's a problem. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're thinking about doing. So the blue bars is, and I think this was about 350 companies. The blue bar is what companies are doing right now to help out their working parents. Purple is what they're considering. Black is no, we're not doing it. We're not thinking about it. The black lines, those are really where we need to have the conversation. What are we going to do? What is it going to look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And then one last thing, another bit of research that we do, we are constantly looking at what is going on out there in the world and bringing that information to our members too. So this may all be stuff you guys are all aware of, but this is just an example of what we just talked about with our diversity, equity, and inclusion group this week. And that is Glassdoor adding the DEI ratings for people to go in and rate their employers on a five-point scale about how good they're doing at diversity and inclusion. JP Morgan, they're cutting bonuses for senior leaders who are not helping to move the needle on DEI initiatives, which I think is great because I think other companies may follow suit. Yelp is allowing customers to say, hey, wait a minute, I had a problem, and posting it to their website, but only after Yelp does an investigation. So there's not like this massive, crazy cancel response. They're actually investigating it, but posting it. And then finally, Starbucks, they're tying executive pay to diversity targets. Yay. So quick, super auctioneer speed, I hope, of an overview of what we're doing. But we're thrilled to be part of the conversation. We have a lot of resources that are available to all of you, whether you're members of I4CP or not. And if you have any questions or there's any anything I can do or my colleagues can do to help, reach out and let me know. That's why we're here. That's it. I went over. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate it. I want to make sure that can you all hear me? Perfect. Thank you, Lori. I really appreciate it. Obviously, I think you can see why we value this newly formed partnership with I4CP. Our vision of LA and Nhra is to bring extremely relevant data, sophisticated data to our community. And I think you can tell that we're going to be able to accomplish that by partnering with I4CP. So we're looking forward to getting the monthly updates from Lori and the team. And we're also looking forward to the future events that are going to be member-only events with I4CP in 2021. And with that in mind, I want to get us started because we want to make sure that we're not running too long. And Cindy Ballard was the CHRO who introduced us to Lori and to Kevin at I4CP. And I think she mentioned in the chat that she's willing to talk to anybody that has questions about I4CP, as is Lori. So please feel free to reach out to Lori or to Cindy or myself, and we can get additional information for you. But they're not going to be strangers. We're going to be working closely with them moving forward. So I think you can see on your screen the result of the poll question. We had 110 responses, and 1 being the highest and 5 being the lowest. The majority of the people that responded, obviously 8 out of 10 were obviously the minority that really put a lot of focus in the DE&I space pre-COVID. And I think that means that the majority of us fall into those other categories. And I know it's a welcome conversation for just about all of us, and it's long overdue. I've really enjoyed being a part of this council, being on a part of the conversation and being a student. And what I've shared with the council is that I'm a student, and what they've shared with me is that we're all students. We're all students as we go through this process. And it's been inclusive, and that's what we're looking to build with the LA and Nhra DE&I initiative. So with that, I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over to Hannah Swice. Hannah Swice is also a member of our council, but she will be facilitating today's conversation with our panel. So Hannah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I would like to also, say a special thank you to you for making the council actually possible and a reality, and, including me in part of this great initiative. So I'm excited to be part of it. So to follow up really on the mission statement that, you covered in the beginning, I would like to further flesh out some of the hurdles that we all face in the process, and to kind of cover some of the concrete goals that we as this council hope to achieve. So this council understands that DEI progress may be challenging to start, sustain, or achieve. And, in those poll results there, I could see, DEI has been important for many organizations. And for some, this might be just a new concept. We understand that the DEI journey is unique and is something that is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So with that DEI journey, it must be intentional, and it must be front of mind for each of us to move towards DEI progress. And we view DEI similar to the concept of wellness. So it is a lifestyle within an organization, and not a short-lived fad. So that's something we're looking to achieve. So as each of you push forward with the progress on the DEI front within your own organizations and collectively help to move the needle forward, we want this council to be a forum and a resource for you doing all this great work out there. And so that's what we want you to see us as. We also want to view this as a place where we can all learn and ask questions. As Andrew mentioned, we're all students, we're all learning, and we're all growing. So we want to be ready to challenge our own perspectives here as well. And apart from these conversations, we would like to provide some real tangibles to you to move your DEI process forward. So some of that will be what Lori shared today. We do also have a playbook in the works. Again, it's not going to be a one size fits all, but it's going to be a tool that you can use in this process. And then I'm seeing, oh, okay. So since this is not a one size fits all or a one and done initiative, we hope that these tangibles will provide you tools to add to your toolbox through this evolution of your DEI journey. Before turning it over to the panel and before we really get into this discussion though, I think it's important to share a little bit about myself and my background and how my background and culture has really impacted my own personal journey and what I hope to achieve as part of this council. So as many of you know, I'm Hannah Swice, and I'm an employment attorney at Fisher Phillips, which is a national labor and employment firm. But what many of you may not know about me is that I'm half Scottish and half Egyptian, born and raised Muslim. My parents immigrated to the United States right before I was born, making me the first person in my family born in the United States. I am child number 3 of 7, and I'm also a proud product of our public school system. I graduated actually from the local Glendale High School here in Los Angeles. Growing up 2 very different cultures, my mother from Scotland, my father from Egypt, in a country that was foreign to both of them, I didn't always feel as if I particularly belonged and often looked to find my own roots. So much so that upon graduating high school, I moved to Egypt, where I lived and I studied for 2 years. When I returned to the United States, though, I did have a renewed kind of sense of my own self-identity in many ways, but I also had a renewed appreciation of what it really meant for me to be an American. I finished my undergrad and I made the decision to go to law school. But by this time I was already married and I was pregnant, but I decided neither would deter me from my path. So I had my first daughter between my first and second semester of law school. And I realized that law school really was my place. It gave me a place to be connected, gave me a direction, and it gave me a voice and a platform, which I didn't always find to be so easy as the third child in a family of 7. So in law school, I became involved and connected to others on similar issues and on one issue that became increasingly important to me, which was really the role of Middle Eastern North Africans in the legal profession. During law school, I became involved in a local organization. It's called the Arab American Lawyers Association of Southern California. And I learned quickly that this was one of the only Middle Eastern North African organizations for legal professionals in the United States, and that only a very small representation of identified Middle Eastern North Africans are in the rungs of the legal profession. I learned that much of this stems from the fact that Middle Eastern and North Africans must identify as either white or other. This really prompted me to engage in a pursuit to push for the identification and the inclusion of legal professionals of Middle Eastern and North African descent. So 8 years later, I'm still part of this organization. I'm actually going to be their incoming president this next year. And we have continued to work towards many initiatives to kind of progress and include Middle Eastern North Africans in the legal profession and elevate kind of their involvement. So some of our recent achievements include really building a bigger network from the law school level upward. We've also pushed for more representation on the bench in conjunction with Governor Newsom's Diversity on the Bench initiative, and then elevating overall in the legal profession. I've also had the honor this year to be one of the founding members of the National Arab American Bar Association. It's based out of Washington, D.C. And it's with the continued goal to build all these initiatives at the national level. So when I really, today in putting this together, and when I look back at my background and culture, some of this has really prompted my passion behind my community work, but I also realized that my background has also helped me to bring a different perspective to my workplace, but also connect with my own clients and businesses in a unique way in what I do. I also don't generally see just one path to a result. And I think my life experience has shown me that there can be non-conventional ways to achieve the result that you're aiming for. So looking forward, I'm really excited to be part of this organization and this council. I want to continue to work with others to affect change in the area of DEI in the workplace, not only for one particular group, but for all groups that are either not represented, underrepresented, or misrepresented. And with that, I really am looking forward to this council and all we can do together. So Camille, I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to you to introduce yourself, how your background and culture has impacted your journey, and what you hope to achieve as part of this council.
Thanks, Hannah. Very similar to your background, actually. I am English, Jamaican, Canadian. So sometimes, frankly, I am not sure what to respond, when someone asks me where I'm from. In my current role, I am the Chief People and Culture Officer at a company called the Springhill Company. One of our brands is Uninterrupted. I kind of launched into my background there before introducing my role. But just to, continue in terms of, I consider myself a melting pot of several cultures. So in terms of my experience, I've grown up primarily in Jamaica and Toronto before coming to the US about 17 years ago. So I definitely know firsthand just the trepidation and fear to be a new person, not only in a different culture, but also in a new person in a company, a new person in a country, and how that can potentially manifest itself. And because of just my mixed background and experience, and I too have lived all over the world, I have found myself in situations where I've had to at times educate others about all three of my customs and my norms, even my facial expressions, what I eat, my way of working, and all that entails who I am. And so that's made me very, very sympathetic and just very empathetic to those coming from different cultures or mixed cultures, mixed background. I've been very empathetic to just how they show up in terms of how they can be authentic to themselves, whether that's in the workplace or, on a personal level. And so that's where I'm passionate about just making sure that whatever I'm doing, whatever environment I'm in, I'm always looking to bring others into the fold and ensure that they do feel very included and they feel like they belong in some capacity. This conversation for me about diversity is not a new one. Obviously, given my background, as a diverse female, I have been living it my whole life. And so I'm very appreciative of Andrew and my fellow panelists in this council that I can have this conversation in a meaningful way on a bigger platform. What I hope to get out of this initiative is an opportunity to listen in a different way. I'm always practicing my listening skills, an opportunity to learn not only from, my fellow council members, but also you guys and, people that have questions or even just best practices that you will share and I will share. My hope at the end of the day is that, I can support anyone that's, whether you're starting your DEI journey or you're in the middle of it, I can support just from the perspective of being able to listen, learn, and share my experience along the way. So that's pretty much who I am.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you, Camille. That's incredible. So next, I'm just going to move along on the panel to each kind of share a little bit more about yourselves. And if you can go next, Lalita, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so jumping off of what you both said, I am a first, or I guess second generation. My parents immigrated here from Thailand. And so, you know, it's been really interesting living in a multicultural household and, you know, trying to assimilate, but at the same time, be true to who I am. And quite frankly, the assimilation came sooner and faster because it's easier to be the same, right? And it took me a while to embrace my own uniqueness and my own diversity. And that's part of the journey, you know, that brought me here today to this panel, and that brought me into the D&I space. I'm also a working mother. I'm in a multiracial relationship, multi-religious relationship. I mean, we're just diversity all over the place. And so it's been a real journey for the 47 years that I've been on this earth. Right now, I'm currently in a global technology firm, stamps.com, as the head of a fantastic and amazingly diverse team of HR and facilities people. I have to tell you, we've got immigrants from Bangladesh, from Africa. We've got, I mean, it's just amazing, the culture and diversity on our team alone. And one of our values is to bring your whole self to work, which means that basically I see you, right? And I celebrate you. And that is so important. We don't hide our diversity. We talk about it, we celebrate it, we share it. It's amazing. And quite frankly, the people I work with have inspired me to also be here today. I think that's important. And then also as an HR professional, probably a lot like many of you on this call, I've managed through lots and lots of diversity issues, claims of racism, sexism, and more from really all various aspects. I've investigated some of them, a lot of them actually, some that have reached litigation. So that's been, part of what has defined my perspective in a lot of ways. I've also had a personal journey, as I mentioned, and it was a little bit more circuitous. So from my childhood, I experienced and quite frankly was trained to minimize microaggressions and discrimination as an Asian, some by other minority groups even. I also experienced it as a female. Even recently, my oldest daughter, who's of mixed heritage, heard the term Twinkie used by a friend, as in yesterday, like just yesterday that happened. So amazing, right? And it wasn't until maybe several years ago that I recognized the personal impact that these little microaggressions or discrimination, outright discrimination, impacted me. And when that slow realization kind of fully matured and hit its full tilt, that's when I would say, I guess I became woke, right? I got angry, I got frustrated. I really started noticing it a lot more. So I guess like anything and everything, recognition, recognizing that there's a problem is the first step, right? And for some people and organizations, that's a big step to take. Recognition or awareness of that issue comes in two forms, right? So first, recognition of the problem sort of on a global scale or large scale, which I always had. But then there's the recognition of the problem as it impacts me at home or in my organization. That's really the second thing that I had to come to, both as a leader and as someone who has now the ability and very strong desire to enact change. And then there was taking action, right? Taking action was the next step and is the next step. And again, for some organizations, they may recognize that there's an issue but do nothing, status quo. And I'll be honest with you guys, and hopefully everyone on the call, you all maybe have the same experience. I did this for a while. I maintained status quo. But what they don't realize and what I didn't realize is that inaction is inaction, right? Inaction is inaction. And other organizations will do just enough, right? Just take enough action to comply with the laws, to comply with regulations, and or do just enough to somewhat openly recognize that there's a problem, sort of. And again, in all humility, I did that too. I mean, we're all on this learning path and this journey together. And what I realized there is that these actions, these actions that we were taking, they might check the box, but they don't actually drive meaningful change. And that's where, for me, I have a problem. So aside from recognizing the problem, now, I'm motivated to make a plan and to take more meaningful, thoughtful, future-focused action that, quite frankly, gets measured, right? Because how are we going to know that change occurs if you don't measure it? And also what I realized, because a lot of times we're focused on recruiting and just throwing diverse people together, that's not enough. You can't just throw diverse people together. It's not just a recruitment problem, right? We need to create a system of equality. We need to create a system of inclusion and safety. And, like I said, I've been at all three types of organizations as a line level HR person, as a leader. And at my current company, we've taken action, but we can do a lot more. So yeah, I'm here like you, I guess, as a student of DEI. I'm hoping to learn and share best practices like you both said. I'm here to be part of a monumental shift in our collective culture. I want to drive change drive change in our part of the system. And basically, this is me trying to take thoughtful action and trying to hopefully inspiring others to do the same.
Thank you, Lalita. So next, I'd like to move on to Jerry to share a little bit about his background and journey.
Thanks, Hannah. And I think, what's going to be great is not only for this particular council, but in future iterations, you'll get to know each of the council members a little bit more. I do want to name something that each council member is doing, which is talking about the intersections of their identities and not just the fact that we are identified as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. It's so important to notice that because I think oftentimes when we talk about diversity, we boil it down to just having a person of color on your staff and checking off that box. As Hannah said, my name is Jerry Gonzales. I am the head of human resources here at the Lucas Museum, a new cultural institution that is being built in South Central Los Angeles. And we have the amazing opportunity that other cultural institutions don't have, which is to build diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategy into the foundation of what we are trying to build for the next 100 years. And not many institutions get to do that. Often institutions have to retrofit that onto their structures. My story and the way that I like to tell this is because I come from a museum that is based on a visual storytelling mission, is to talk about a poster print that follows me throughout every office for the last 20 years. And it is a poster, it is a print of a door in Stockton, California in 1930, and it is of a hotel door. And on that hotel door are printed the words, "Absolutely no Filipinos allowed." So my name, I am a Filipino living in America. I'm not Mexican, even though oftentimes people get that confused because of my last name. And Filipinos represent the largest Asian American group in California, and also represent the least voting power and the least representation in lots of different industries. And so the point of me kind of sitting on this council is beyond just this idea that my fellow panelists have talked about of representing a different perspective because of all the different parts of my identity, is really this idea of representation. There are not enough people in senior and executive roles that actually can inspire younger people to think about careers in these different areas or to advocate for these types of changes. You'll find as you get to know me amongst all my fellow esteemed panelists, is I'm the one who's impatient, who's also always talking about pragmatic approaches to every day. So rather than saying, well, DEI is so hard, it's going to take like 10 years for us to do, I will be the first person to say, okay, so what are the 5 things that you're going to do tomorrow, or the 3 things that you're going to do when you get back at your desk today? And I'm hoping that you all will engage in that process of thinking about what are the actionable steps you can do after this call is over.
That's great, thank you. And that's a wonderful way of providing a visual for us. So next, I'd like to move on to Dr. Anita.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, affectionately known as Dr. Anita, and I am the founder and CEO of Dr. Anita Enterprises. I provide executive coaching and team dynamic strategies that helps teams get unstuck by working with leaders and teams to navigate complexity and change, such as diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And as I thought about my own path, I think it began subconsciously when I married. My full name is Anita Polite Wilson. My married name is Polite, and my married name is Wilson. And I decided that I wanted to honor my family heritage by keeping my maiden name, because when my great-great-grandfather was freed as a slave, the tradition was to take the former slave owner's last name as their own. But because of the way he conducted himself and the way he polite. And so he decided to keep that as his last name. And so to remind myself that regardless of the circumstances that I find myself in, regardless of the way people may treat me or see me, I am going to conduct myself in a manner that honors my family history and may draw people to me, just like they drew people to my great-great-grandfather. That being said, the way I draw others to people or the way I draw others to me in my work is to refuse shame and blame methods when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. That's where I focus. And instead, I facilitate opportunities to know and grow through conversations that matter. And this is absolutely a conversation that matters. And I like to make it a practice to drive conversations that convert to actions that will change behaviors. I think Lalita mentioned check the box initiatives. I don't do that. I do change the culture behaviors. And with that being said, I'm very much looking forward to being a part of this council. I am honored to be working with these fabulous people. And Andrew, I just want to thank you for the gracious invitation to be here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anita. And what an interesting history of your name. I'm really happy to learn about that. So next, I'm going to move on to Barb, last but absolutely not least, for her to share a little bit about her background and journey.
Good afternoon, almost evening, everyone. My name is Barbara Francis, and I have the privilege of working with a fuel distributor, and we're based in Orange. I've been with the organization for a little over 20 years now, and I'm the Vice President of Human Resources. I also sat on the board for NHRA here in Orange County. I was the secretary and then moved on to president-elect, president, and then past president. So it was a lot of fun. I really think that the association truly brings a lot of value to our practice. They've helped me in so many different ways throughout my HR career. So I'm grateful for NHRA, and I'm grateful to be here with you this evening. I'm a native to Orange County. There's not many of us, but I am a native. I have two wonderful daughters, and one that lives in Chicago and the other here in Costa Mesa. I will say that growing up in Orange County as an African American, it has definitely had its challenges. I feel very fortunate that I had parents that really embodied the power of love, and they really believe that that's what helped my siblings and I really charter through some really difficult times with racism in Orange County, the south side of Orange County. I originally grew up in the north side of Orange County, where there were predominantly Black neighborhoods, and then moved to Orange County in the south side, where it was predominantly white neighborhoods. So there were many challenges there, but we were able to overcome those. My hope is to, as being a part of the council, is to really do everything that I can to learn from the amazing people that you all just have the privilege of meeting. I hope that each of you will consider being vulnerable and being very open through this process. And I hope that you're able to take this back into your communities, either at work or at home, or just in the places where you reside. But to bring this, what we have to offer, back to your communities. That's my hope for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, and really thank you all for sharing, your stories, and they're all really special and inspiring, and being vulnerable here. I think that is important for us to move forward and really understand each other. So moving really into some of the questions as we look at the DEI journey in the workplace, Jerry, I'd like I'd like to ask you this question. If you could tell us a little bit more about the role and your thoughts about the role of the HR leader in DEI in an organization versus a dedicated DEI hire, such as a chief diversity officer. If you could kind of tell us your thoughts on those roles.
Thanks, Hannah. It's like actually a really good question. And I think lots of organizations are pondering how to think about diversity and what their investment in these types of roles are, especially since the Black Lives Matter movement really came to full national coverage in the last couple of months. I will say that it is a fallacy for anyone to believe that a single person, a single hire can fix organizational issues. And that's often the problem, right? Is that we hire a chief diversity officer, give them all the responsibility to fix diversity, inclusion, and belonging issues, but give them none of the resources to be successful. And we've actually seen both large and small corporations fail and often see a turnover in their CDO because of the fact that they are not given the opportunity to actually enact those changes. So if you are an organization that is in a deep place of reflection, thinking about bringing on a diversity hire, a diversity role, you really have to think about what values are guiding that particular conversation and whether or not your strategy allows for change in your organization. One big conversation that Dr. Anita and I have had in the past is asking this core question of, is your organization ready to engage in a diversity journey? Because if the answer is no, then don't do it, because all you're doing is setting people up for failure. I think there is a role to be said about a CDO, a chief diversity officer role, or a diversity director being a convener of diversity strategy, but really diversity strategy needs to live in every vertical in your organization. And now the CHRO, the chief human resource officer, your head of human resources, your HR exec, your VP of human resources, whatever your title is, you have a significantly larger role in kind of stewarding diversity and inclusion efforts, because so much of the work that organizations do, 70% of your payroll is going towards people. And if you can get your people right, and if you can get your diversity and inclusion strategy right, then your business is going to succeed. One thing that I like to tell people is, if your executive boards are wondering what's the value of diversity, just write them a copy of the book, The Diversity Bonus by Scott Page, which gives you a formula for diversity and how it actually affects your bottom line. And you'll see boards actually get on the same page. The last thing I'll say is, what I said at the beginning during my intro is so important. If you were thinking about your diversity and inclusion strategy as a retrofit or as a separate strategy, separate and apart from your core strategy of how you deliver your work, you're going to fail. And the reason you're going to fail is because your diversity strategy is going to sit on the shelf, gather dust, and it's never going to move forward. So it has to be integrated in the way that you do your day-to-day work. I mean, Camille, what do you think about this with the work that you're doing in your industry, especially because you're a for-profit?
Yeah, I can speak to the other side in terms of being a CHRO that is also the diversity lead. So I think it really depends on the size and structure of the company. If you're in a smaller company, in most cases, that CHRO person is wearing many hats. The role in my eyes, whether you have a DEI person versus a CHRO and they're two separate people, is that it's really critical for that head of HR person to get buy-in from senior leadership. That's where it needs to start. If you don't have buy-in from senior leadership, you're probably not going to be set up for success. And it's your whatever actions or initiatives you're taking around diversity won't matter as much. You really need that top-down strategy and direction to flow from whether it's a CHRO or that DEI lead. And I think it's really important for that CHRO or DEI lead to get buy-in on a financial level as well. It's not just it's not just about saying, yes, you can run off and create a DEI or a diversity roadmap. They need to understand that it needs to be a strategic, consistent program, in terms of you're going to need support, not only from leadership, but you're going to also need to engage and enroll others within the organization. So you're going to need support in terms of creating committees potentially and engaging other stakeholders to help you along the way. As Jerry, as you said, it takes more than one person. It's going to take a village. And so it's just really, really important, whether you're a CHRO or a DEI lead, to recognize the commitment that's required and make it very, very clear what you need in terms of support financially and otherwise, you know, in order to create that roadmap, create that strategy, map out all your initiatives related to that roadmap, create metrics, which Lalita and others spoke to measure those results, because without creating metrics and measuring your results, you're really not going to know how far you're getting. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are great. You know, thank you very much. Those are great points. And I think really it touches on that, you know, neither of these roles really can just be a title. And I think there really has to be support holistically, internally from the organization, you know, behind these initiatives. So really in thinking about this, if, you know, if you were thinking about a hire or where you are on the DEI progression spectrum. So we know that some of you on this call may be farther along on this spectrum than others. But if an organization is starting from square one, what are some of the ways an organization may start the DEI journey? And what are some of the ground rules that are important to consider when starting the conversation? So I'm going to start with Barb to tell us a little bit more about starting the journey. And then I'm going to hand it over to Lalita, because Lalita really can, you know, she really has a lot of knowledge in helping us understand, you know, kind of some of these ground rules. So Barb, you want to help in starting the journey?
I will do that. During our discussions in planning for the meetings today, I shared with the panel that I was a little nervous about even being on the panel, as I've not started my journey with my organization on DEI. I would imagine that many of you that are seeing this evening may be in the same position as I am, afraid that it may be met with resistance from the people that we work with. And also it may be something that's so big, and it's how do I get my arms around that? How do I really process all of this and help other people to understand why this is so important? What I think is that we have amazing, smart people that you all are able to meet on this panel. And they are very passionate about helping me and helping you to get through this journey. So here's where I decided that I needed to start. I need to start with myself first. And if you'll listen to these 3 words, I hope that will help you start your journey as well. And those 3 words are surrender yourself, surrender to yourself. And what that means to me is I have to dare to be outrageous in this plan. I have to dare to be free, and I have to dare to take high risk, because that's what's going to move us to that next place that we need to get to. Lalita? Lalita, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Barb, for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, surrendering to yourself is so important. And what that means is we have to divest ourselves from our egos, you know, and the perception that, you know, we know all. And one of the things that this council has been saying, and I love, is we keep reiterating that we're students to this process, right? And I love that, because that gives us a foundation of humility. It tells that we still have a lot to learn, right? And learn from each other. And when we talk about learning from each other, you know, one of the things I learned from one of my UK colleagues is the concept of Chatham House rules, right? So Chatham House rules is something that's actually been around for almost 100 years. And what it does is it helps to create a trusted environment to understand and resolve complex problems. Diversity is a complex problem. There's no easy answer to any of it, right? So its guiding spirit is share the information you receive, but don't reveal the identity of who said it. So what it's geared to do is to allow people to speak safely as individuals, to express views that may not be their organization's views, right? So, just because, I work at stamps.com doesn't necessarily mean that I'm speaking to you as a representative of stamps.com today. And it also is geared towards inspiring free discussion. So I guess colloquially, wow, that's a tough word. It's what's said in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? It's allowing people to express their views and opinions, to challenge each other respectfully, to suspend judgment, to suspend shame, to suspend guilt, and to harness that inner curiosity to understand each other's perspectives and experiences better. And Dr. Anita again and Jerry and I had this great conversation about how to keep people engaged, how to make sure that we don't disengage people, because we need everyone involved in this conversation. So the Chatham House rules is one of them. And Dr. Anita had mentioned in another conversation, keeping it out of politics, right?
Absolutely. I think often when we have these difficult conversations, people tend to use politics and religion as a way of deflecting from actually getting into the tough conversations. And as I'm listening to my colleagues, I'm connecting their comments. Jerry talked about the readiness for this type of work. Camille talked about it needs to be a top-down approach. Barb said we need to surrender to ourselves. And then Lalita said divest from the ego. And I'm working with a new client now. This is their brand new journey into diversity, equity, inclusion. And I've actually started the leadership team, the executives, the SVPs, with a 3-month mastermind and a 6-month one-on-one inclusion coaching with me. And the purpose is to get them comfortable with these kinds of conversations with one another, so that as a leadership team, when we begin to roll out these concepts and conversations, they're not squirming. You can't squirm in front of your folks. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it's within the discomfort that we grow. And so it's huge that as a leadership team, they get together and work through these things in the privacy and safety of a leadership group. And the difference with my approach in the mastermind is I actually focus on their own personal journey. And we went pretty deep and a little raw, but then they're able to accept and embrace and really sink into the traditional DE&I training that we take them through. So the sequencing is much more impactful when I ask people to look at it from a personal perspective, then take that personal perspective and say, all right, how am I now showing up as an executive and a model of this change for my people?
I think something that you just said, Dr. Anita, is so important, because oftentimes when we talk about diversity work, or diversity inclusion work, we boil that down to saying, well, folks that identify as BIPOC need to be leading the work or only doing the work. In fact, D&I work is not for the BIPOC population, it's for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so what I actually encourage, and something that we've all talked about, is what is the role of white folks in this work? And it's really to be in conversation and rub up against those like raw, uncomfortable places where you can actually have those discussions. I also think that it is irresponsible, however, when white allies say, teach me about what it means to be, to experience discrimination in these ways, or microaggressions. I think white folks have to do the work. They can ask for resources, they can be pointed in the right direction, but they've got to do the work themselves. And that needs to be a dialogue between and amongst, because at the end of the day, the country where we live in America is growing into a majority of BIPOC folks, right? But when you look at executives at the highest level, they still reflect white America, like, Caucasian folks. And so we really need to be able to harness those areas of power in order to make organizational changes and make sure that the strategy lines up there. So I think it is a both and equation that we have to look at.
I agree with you 100%. And this may not be the best analogy, but I often say to my white counterparts, the Underground Railroad would not have made it without white folks. We need white folks even today, right? So thank you, Jerry.
I gotta say, Dr. Anita, one of the things I love that you said too is that we have to do the personal work, and that's what you inspired the leadership to do. So, the people on this call, we have to do our own personal work. Mm-hmm. If we're going to lead initiatives and if we're going to be active proponents of change, we have to understand our own biases. We have to understand our own hurdles, our own obstacles, our own intentions, and challenge ourselves because whatever we build will be affected by, by us and by our own biases and all our other baggage that we carry with us. And one of the things I think is important, and I'll give it to Camille, is there's a psychology behind,
Yes.
the diversity issue and, seeking similarity.
Yeah, talking about allies, I can speak to our journey as a company. I fortunately have always been empowered in my role to create a diverse team, to work with leadership to create that diverse team that's representative of the audience and clients that we, support. And so along the way, we have engaged because it was important to our team. Our team's actually 70% people of color, 40% female. So along the way, it just became very important that with a diverse team, you've got to engage them differently. You've got to manage them differently. Make no mistake about it, there's work involved. So to support like soft skills, like self-awareness, emotional intelligence, I was very fortunate to engage an executive coach rather and implant him in our environment. Our executive coach has been with me along the way in terms of just helping me roll out like education series around how to communicate with a population that's so diverse, how to make sure that you are always listening and using empathy. He's really given us tools and a language that's really grounded us as a team. He's, for instance, taught us about, the biological aspects of the brain and how that plays into unconscious bias and the need for us to be self-aware of the subconscious of our thinking as we're day-to-day fighting our biases. So my point here is, there's white allies that we can engage. There's also professionals that you can engage in your journey, wherever you are on that journey. And I would really encourage you to engage a professional, especially if as an HR person, you're not as savvy with this area or you don't know where to start. The key thing as well is that it is going to be an educational series. Like, it's not just a one and done thing. Companies should not just pull in that expert because, their teams are in uproar rather around a George Floyd situation. It really needs to be a firm commitment and an ongoing sustainable strategy where your team is, having ongoing conversations in terms of how people are feeling and what you need to do to build that groundwork from top down, bottom up, to make sure that your policies, your practices, everything, is screaming inclusion and diversity and making sure everyone feels like they're connected. So that's what I would say there, like making sure that you leverage all your allies, white allies, your experts, making sure that you're leveraging everyone as much as you can to just keep having this conversation.
Yeah, and I the only thing I'd add to that, because we were talking about a DEI journey, is that this isn't linear, and it isn't like it doesn't go this way. If we were building a chart, you will have setbacks. And the one big piece of advice, if we want to do this now, is I will say, make sure your eyes aren't bigger than your stomach when it comes to DEI work. Think about the things that can actually get done and that you can feel like are wins for you, and then you can build on those wins.
Yeah,
I would say make progress, not promises.
Right.
Yes.
Positive incremental change, just keep going and go a little at a time. And eventually a year later, you'll look back and be like, wow, that was a lot, because it can be very intimidating.
So I know you're all kind of touching on, setting some ground rules and, having somebody even come in when there is a lot of diversity and saying, is there, particular terms or, ways in which we act that we should be aware of and all of those kinds of things. Is there a kind of, some definitions or terms, at the foundational level that we should be looking to?
Well, the council here, we've compiled a 27-page handout of DEI definitions, but I want to focus on 3 that I would consider to be the ABCs or the foundational building blocks of DE&I. Ally, which is someone who makes a commitment. You don't have to be one to stand with. Bias, the tendency to believe that some people, ideas, etc., are better than others. And then culture, the shared patterns of behaviors and interactions. And so I would summarize the essence of these 3 foundational building blocks in just a few words. intellectual and cultural humility. And allies have this wired for the most part. However, we must remember that everyone has bias. Even as wonderful as the folks are on this panel and we focus on this work, we all have bias. And I think that we get that. But being aware of bias is working to manage our biases is key. And then that's where culture comes into play. And the culture needs to be conditioned to reject new knowledge, KNEW knowledge that's based on assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs. And we need that are derived from media and movies. And then we need to accept new knowledge, NEW, about self and others based on relationship building. In that way, cultures can express and experience belonging that informs and includes everyone. So that's where I would start.
Thank you. And this kind of really takes us really to the next question, in, starting this process and moving along, there might be obstacles and challenges a HR leader can face in this process, or a diversity leader can face in this process. And Dr. Anita, in your kind of work, what are some of those tips? One, what are some of those challenges that they might face? And what are some of those tips to tackle those challenges?
The challenge is always, where do we start with this conversation? And so my approach is not to discuss race relations. I stress relationships. And then I found more success by assuring my clients that it's not about reaching agreement, it's about raising awareness. And scaffolding my approach with these two core tenets eventually results in better race relations and agreement about what belonging means to the whole and not just the majority. And just to give you a really quick example, last week when I was meeting with my client, I took them through an exercise where we had to describe what belonging looks, acts, sounds, and feels like for everyone enterprise-wide. And it was revealing. And we took the raw data and we gave it to marketing communications. And by the way, I actually had them sit in and participate in this exercise so that they could feel what the executives were going through and grappling with. And based on those outcomes, they're going to take that information and create their marketing campaign. So unless we're clear about what belonging will look like and act like and feel like and sound like for everyone across the board, back to Jerry's point, it's kind of a moot point to get started. You have to start with the end in mind. And when we're successful with our journey, what is that going to look like? And by the way, this journey is one that does not end. I can't remember which panelists mentioned the fact that, their company was 104 years. It's going to be another 104 years. This has to be infused into the DNA of any organization if it's going to work. Again, out with the check the box initiatives, in with the change the culture behaviors.
Thank you. And, as everyone knows, kind of this year, apart from COVID-19, which we've all been experiencing and continue to, there's been this huge movement and push towards DEI, part of why we're all having this conversation here today. And really, an example of this has been BLM, which has really been around since 2013. But the momentum this year has really been prompted by the killing of George Floyd. So Camille, this one is for you. What has your organization done to continue the DEI discussion and actually move things forward since George Floyd?
Well, frankly, what I'll say is we are doing what we've always done, because it's not just about the George Floyd incident. There's been other incidents since then. I think coupled with the complexity of COVID, coupled with the complexity of the election, there's just a lot going on in our external environment. And as I said earlier, I am fortunate that we do have a team that's very diverse. And within that team, we have ingrained in our culture for people to speak up and say what's on their mind. So we've just been more diligent, I would say, in terms of checking in on our folks. I don't think it's rocket science, checking in from leadership downwards and really encouraging our employees to check in with their peers, just so that everyone feels supported at this time with everything going on, making sure that everyone has the space to say what's on their mind, obviously in a respectful way, to get to a place of understanding. We're really promoting and have been promoting just authenticity and being yourself. Like, so, you know, there's some days where I myself have called, you know, one of my colleagues to say, I'm not feeling too good today. You know, a couple of days when, you know, what's going on with Philly, I called to say, hey, I might need a pep talk, right? So it's just being, you know, as Barb said, like it's being vulnerable, it's being humble, and it's letting people know that when you're checking in with them, and also let them know how you're feeling as well, so that you can just let people see who you are and where you are in the moment without judgment. I think it's a time to over communicate among ourselves within our company, that we are here to support others. We're here to make sure that they know that they have a safe place to go. They have a safe place to go virtually, especially at this point. You know, we do things like we've always done in terms of like auditing, ongoing, all of our practices. We do that on a quarterly basis, like making sure we are auditing all of our practices. When with new hires coming in, we get a temperature gauge on how they're feeling coming into the culture. You know, they're coming in with a new perspective. So we ask for their feedback on things after a 3-month, 6-month, year mark, that we can continue to do to ensure that we're creating an inclusive culture from the top down and they feel like they belong. And I think it's also important just to mention that we're leveraging heavily, or, you know, ERG groups or committees, people, key stakeholders, again, in our population, to ensure that if they have an ear to the ground that maybe is not bubbling up to HR or other leaders in the company, that they're bringing those concerns to us in a timely manner so that we can address them. So it's, you know, all in all, it's over communicating, it's checking in, and it's making sure that there's that constant loop and feedback of just addressing concerns or being aware of concerns so that we can address them. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. And, you know, this point you're making, I remember actually Lalita has made it too, about having, you know, ambassadors and within the company and how important their role is too, and to really understand what's going on internally. So I don't know, also Lalita, if you kind of have some other thoughts on this year and, you know, kind of moving this forward or having a discussion.
Yeah, you know, historically stamps hasn't taken, we don't like to take, I say we don't like to take positions on what I would consider hot topics, right? So this is what I would consider uncomfortable space for us that we are moving into. I'm just being honest with everybody because I think I'm probably not the only one, right? And so we've had to take a hard look at ourselves in terms of, you know, who we want to be as an organization. And quite frankly, I think what we were talking about earlier, finding those ambassadors. Where are those ambassadors, right? Creating a stewardship, you know, getting people involved at all levels of the organization, because while we need leadership support, this isn't just a leadership driven thing, right? It has to become a momentous cultural shift. And we need, you know, we just need as many people involved as possible, and finding those ambassadors is, quite frankly, one of the ways we've started. Is we said, you know what, we're going to look for those people and say, you know, and tap them for their insights, tap them for their ideas, get their buy-in. That is probably where I say we've started, and we're getting better momentum from that. And, you know, I think it's going to be different for every organization, but just again, a moment of honesty, that's where we started.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think really kind of, you know, that highlights really this is, you know, different for every organization, how you approach this discussion, which discussions you approach. And again, this is really for us to be open in that and understanding that, you know, a starting place for one organization might be different than another. And so really, as we're kind of getting closer to the end here, I would really like if each one of you could share really one tangible, I think as Jerry's mentioned, you know, that an HR leader can take as they walk away today in moving the needle forward in their organization. So if each one of you could really share, one piece of advice that an HR leader can do, one action that they could take.
I can start.
Go.
Oh,
You go.
sorry.
Go, Camille.
Yeah, I actually saw in the comments a question from Shirley, and so I just want to address it. Absolutely. I think a takeaway that I would recommend and just highly encourage is start at the assessment phase. Maybe it's a survey, maybe it's a couple of conversation or a series of conversation with your employee base to really start talking about where you are. I think before you can throw options and solutions around DE&I, you need to kind of know where your ground zero is. So to answer your question, Shirley, yes, that's where I would start. I would start at the assessment phase, like with a survey, a Google survey. It could be really simple. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. I just think it's really important to start having the conversations around, what do people need? What do they want? What is it going to take for people to feel included, like they belong, like they're engaged as it relates to diversity and inclusion? So that's what I'd recommend, that you could just start with a simple survey.
And just so everyone knows, the question that Shirley asked was, how have you assessed if your employees feel that they are working in an inclusive culture, or what might be happening that makes them feel excluded? So that was Shirley's question. And Camille, I think you did a good job of answering that. And, I'll get off the screen and let you provide your tangibles. But I love this part of the conversation because we discussed as a panel, how can we bring some tangible items for people to bring back to their workforce? And that's going to be a big part of what this council is going to be developing for future programming. And we haven't mentioned it, but we are developing a DE&I playbook that we are going to share with the NHRA community end of first quarter in 2021. And this council is doing the God's work in putting that together, and they're working on it as we speak. So Shirley, if we haven't answered your question, then just feel free to reach out and we can circle back with you. Back to you, Hannah.
All right, thanks. So and I think as you're saying, we're wanting to give some of those resources, and one can be, sharing surveys and where you can, access those and where to start with those. And so again, with regard to the tangibles, if you each want to share, a tangible that the HR professional can walk away with today, that would be great.
Yeah,
I'm gonna jump in and go next, Jerry.
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I first want to say, Camille, spot on with that answer, but I want to take us back for a minute. And I think that framing DE&I as another strategy or skill set or collection of tools to master as an HR practitioner won't get you very far. Before you get into that, starting with an assessment, which is absolutely right on the money, instead begin the journey by focusing on where you are personally situated in the world of DE&I as an individual. And I've got one example that I want to share that I just thought was really powerful. Last night I watched This Is Us. Never seen it before, heard it's a wonderful show. And the storyline last night was as if the George Floyd death had just occurred. And there's a mother and a father with grown children, a white male, a white daughter, and a black son. They're all family. Been raised this way for 40 years. And throughout the dynamics, the black son and his white sister had an exchange in which she was, really feeling very apologetic and crying. And I don't imagine what you're going through. And he looked at her and he said, "What exactly are you apologizing for?" And she really didn't know. And he said, "I've been in this family for 40 years. This George Floyd incident is not the first of its kind. And you all have never wanted to discuss it. And I've never brought it up because I didn't want to make you, my white family, uncomfortable." And so I would say the first step that I would encourage you to take is to situate yourself in this own journey. And my takeaway is this: challenge yourself to just get uncomfortable enough to begin, to try, to start to understand the enormity of discomfort that Black people, people of color, and other marginalized people feel day in and day out. And as an HR practitioner, if you can first show up as an individual who gets it a little more deeply about the experiences that other people have, then you walk that into your role as an HR practitioner. That would be my takeaway for you.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Anita, absolutely correct, right? Like this is really about clarifying your values that really set the North Star about how you go into this journey. I know a lot of times where HR executives struggle is being able to validate why this is important and validating to their executive team. So this is one thing that I hope all of you do when you get back to your desk, because this is an easy pull. If you go into your applicant tracking systems or if you go into your human resource information systems and pull the data on both your recruiting pipelines as well as your turnover numbers and disaggregate the numbers. When you disaggregate the numbers, it will actually tell you a very clear story about who is both leaving your organization and whether or not you are getting the type of recruiting pipelines into your organization to create a diverse pipeline. Oftentimes people leave it at, well, we've recruited lots of different people, and at the application stage, more than 50% are people of color. But what you don't see when you don't disaggregate your data is, as you get through all the different stages, from your phone screens to your interviews, is that number becoming disproportionate? Are your populations becoming much more of the majority culture rather than people of color being allowed into those other spaces? That'll tell you a lot about your bias. So I say pull your numbers immediately when you get back to your desk, either tonight or tomorrow morning, and that will tell you the story about who you really are.
So what I would take away from this is it goes back to what everyone was saying, and it starts with me. And it means that I go home and I have conversations with my family at the dinner table, and I talk about the things that are uncomfortable for me. I talk about the things that happened to me and what they meant to me. And then asking questions of people that are of a diverse background and feeling a little bit more comfortable that you can go to people and ask questions that you want more information on. I think it's important to really gain a good understanding before we dive in and not know what we're really getting ourselves into. So I agree. I watched This Is Us last night too, and it was very, very powerful. There are so many times where I've sat back and it's just, why do I feel this way? Why am I not talking about it? And then there's times where it just becomes this monumental thing and everyone's talking about it. And you wonder, why weren't we talking about it back then? So I would say start at home. Go home, have dinner, have a great conversation with your family, and get a little bit more information, get a little bit more comfortable with the way that people are feeling and how we can help them to feel better and belong differently than what they do today.
I think, Hannah, I'm the last one. So I think I'll share with you, I think two things. Number one, Dr. Anita touched on it earlier, definitions. I think sometimes we use phrases like privilege and we're not operating on the same definition. So getting everyone on the same page is important. And then finally, and this is something that we're working on right now, is embed diversity everywhere. Be Machiavellian about it. It's got to be everywhere. Do your career sites, are you showing diverse people on your career sites? Do you talk about diversity and respectful communication in your values? Do you talk about it in your onboarding? Do you reinforce it in your training? It's got to be everywhere because, again, you want to make it pervasive throughout the organization. So that's one thing that I would say is diversity, the language of diversity and respectful communication has to be everywhere.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. I mean, I think this is really great. I think we're really, I'm so honored to be part of this council with all of you. And I think, getting this conversation going here and being a resource for others, to have this conversation and feel comfortable having this conversation. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're at 5:31, so we're right on target. I want to thank everybody on the council. Hannah, thank you for the effort and the work and the energy that you put into developing the structure of the panel. interview. And to everyone that is on the council, obviously you're volunteering, you're putting energy into this because you're passionate about it. And I'm thankful for your commitment to the DE&I cause, to LA NHRA. And I just feel fortunate to be a member of the council and learning as we go through this journey together. So what's next? And what next is, LA NHRA is going to be really relaunching in 2021. We will be sending this recording out to all participants, and we will send out the calendar for 2021. And we're just be on the lookout for what we are going to be rolling out next year. Next year is going to be fraught with challenges as well. COVID will continue through the new year. We have a winter in front of us. And between now and then, there's going to be a lot of different challenges that will present themselves to us. So this council, the LA NHRA community, as well as another council that we formed, the Mental Health Council, is going to be addressing all of these topics. So a lot more to come from LA NHRA, a lot more to come from this council. You'll receive emails from us. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. When we send out this information, I will include the council members on that email. So if you have direct questions that you would like to ask the council, we by all means will respond to you and get back to you in a timely fashion. So thank you to the council. Thank you to all those who attended this evening. Please feel free to share your feedback. We're learning as we go, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.